trying to make sense of Brexit, what it could mean for Europe, as well as the UK and its neighbors, and what could we expect in the coming months once the UK begins the process of leaving the European Union. Hello and welcome to People First, the EPP Group's monthly program on issues with impact on people like you. Joining us to answer some of your questions is Mairead McGuinness. You are a Vice President of the European Parliament from Ireland. And Paulo Rangel, you're an EPP Group Vice Chair, and you're also responsible for the group on the future of Europe. Two perfect people to talk to about this, and a question to both of you to start. The election of Donald Trump as the US President. Now, he said the day before his election that his election would be Brexit plus, plus, plus. What kind of impact do you see of the election of Donald Trump on this Brexit process? Start with you, Mairead.
I predicted both, as it turned out. I believed Brexit would happen because I was watching the debate, and I was not surprised that Donald Trump was elected. So on both of these, we respect democracy. People have spoken. They're not linked, but there's a not dissimilar pattern behind some of the reasons why people voted as they did. Yep. From our side here in the Parliament, we have to deal with Brexit.
Yeah. So what does it mean for you?
Separate from the US. I mean, very clearly what it means for me is my constituency borders Northern Ireland, which post-Brexit will be the external border with the European Union. So at the moment we can travel freely on the island of Ireland. We have no restrictions on trade, and we want that to continue.
There is one effect clear from the first declarations of Theresa May, especially this hard Brexit apparent approach, right. That is the 27 become very united. Something that was not really envisageable before.
So the silver lining in this.
Because she defined a kind of common enemy or common adversaire.
Shall we say.
And so this is something.
I tell you what, but let's move on to the viewer questions and see what they have to say. And what better place to go to get those questions than a pub. And that's what we did here in Brussels. We went to a pub and got some questions, and here's the first of them.
I'm just wondering about Brexit, whether the English really were aware about the consequences of this decision.
What are the real consequences here? Because so far the short-term consequences were that the pound went down, British exports went up. But what are the real consequences for Europe?
I think it would be tougher than the Brits think for them.
Yeah, I think apart from the economic, which is huge, I think the whole emotional disattachment will be enormous, because every facet of our lives are covered by EU legislation for over 40 years now. So to actually extract that from the UK, from the European Union, in my view, is extremely difficult. And also there are UK citizens living in Spain and Ireland, there are EU citizens living in the United Kingdom. We have many, many issues to deal with. And I don't think it's a question, it's a good question, what, do they understand? But regardless, we have an outcome. So I think we're only going to see, as you're trying to say there very well, Paulo, that the real economic consequences and other consequences will only begin to flow when deep analysis is carried out. And whether we will have time in 2 years to actually draw up a withdrawal agreement is the concern that I would have.
That is a big question. Let's move on to an existential question here. Let's listen to that one.
I was wondering if the European project will fall once the Brexit will be executed, because as we are living in a smaller country, we strongly believe in the European project, and it would be a drama for us if this project would disappear.
How much of a drama would that be for Ireland? Your constituency is on the border with Northern Ireland.
Well, I mean, there's a drama already because we've been impacted because of the vote. You've mentioned the currency, but I mean, the question there is a much bigger one about can the European Union survive the exit of the United Kingdom?
Will it?
And I think that is a question for the EU 27. I believe it will and it can, but it does require us to be very, very, very strong. Interesting that that gentleman talks about how important it is for small member states. From an Irish perspective, I believe we became fully independent and equal when we joined the European Union, and we joined with the United Kingdom. We had a very different relationship with them in the past. We have a better relationship with them now because of the EU.
Strengthened by it.
So it's up to the European Union of 27.
And I think a lot of this also has to do with the economy, how the economy is working. Here's a question on that.
I just want to know what the impact is of the Brexit for the tourism in Flanders.
Okay, a local question, but we can broaden that to the EU. What will the economic impact be on the EU by Brexit?
Both parts will lose something. So Brexit will have an impact in European economy will have an impact in UK. The Brexit also will have an impact in UK. I think the impact will be more negative in UK than in Europe.
Why?
But because they depend too much on our economy and they represent less than we represent to them. So Europe is very important for them.
What about Ireland? Because you are bordering the UK. You're joined at the hip, literally.
Yeah, we are joined at the hip, which is why we're probably joined at the same time. But to that the question and to your question, we would be very concerned around trade flows, because particularly for the island of Ireland, but the broader trade with the United Kingdom generally, because we're near neighbours, we trade with them, but they with us.
So you're going to take a hit.
We don't know. I mean, that's a question that we cannot answer. But clearly, the status quo will not be maintained. And I believe that anything less than the status quo is less beneficial to all of us.
Okay, let me move on, because I know you guys got to go to meetings and we have so many things to cover, but youth. Let's talk about youth. Here we go.
I understood that it's mainly the elder people in England or Britain that voted for the Brexit. So they have voted for something that might have an effect on the youth that will pay their pensions. So how will the future be of these younger Brits that couldn't vote, in fact?
Well, people have talked about that irony. What about that? And also for Irish youth as well.
It is interesting as you go around. Even my own constituency, there is more idealism about Europe amongst younger people. They don't always come out to vote in European elections, which is troubling. I think there's more anxiety amongst the older generation. Maybe they've seen so much change that they're fearful. Yeah. You cannot ignore their pain or their fear. And yes, there is a point about that their decision impacts on others who are younger. But look, politics can bring about change in the future. And just because something happens today doesn't mean that in 10 years' time it remains the same. If I've discovered anything in this house, is that change is constant and crises are constant in this house and around the European Union, and we should accept that as the norm, not as the unique.
Okay, let me move on to another question on education, youth-related education.
How does the Brexit affect students from the UK studying abroad and vice versa? What can happen to their status? What can happen to their ties to the countries that they've made and to their own country? This is something that really piques my interest.
The funds of European Union are really supporting a lot of the work of LSE, of Cambridge University, Oxford University. I've seen this reference of a speech of a minister that said they had to do a list of the foreign students and professors that were in British universities, what was really something that was the last thing that I could imagine about Britain, that is the land of freedom before all other countries. And I must say that here, if they go by this path, if they try to insist on this, they will lose the real richness, and I would say really something that we admire in the British education system, especially the high-level system, that is to have everybody on board from all the countries and especially from Europe.
So it kind of breaks that spirit.
Well, absolutely, because education crosses borders and scientists and research know no boundaries, and I think that post-Brexit we want that to continue. But really it is up to those who sit down around the table. I guess that the United Kingdom university sector really wants to stay with Europe at its heart. We have to find a way, because their innovation and their brain power is so important to us.
It's the future of Europe.
It's the future,
right?
yes.
Let me move on to widen this to the free movement of workers. Here's a question on that.
I would like to know if it will be more difficult to travel to the United Kingdom, or will things stay the same for EU nationals?
That's probably one of the most salient issues that prompted a lot of people to vote for Brexit. Yeah. What's going to happen here?
Well, I think that mantra of let's take back control included take back control of the UK borders, and that was very strong in the referendum campaign.
Yep.
I mean, and that young person is speaking very much to that concern that the United Kingdom will limit movement inside its territory, and therefore that the European Union will have to respond in some way to that. I think our red lines on this are quite clear. We want our 4 freedoms, including freedom of movement, and the United Kingdom think otherwise.
We will have to be very, very strict in this matter, because this is really the richness of the European Union is something that normally we only know when we lose it.
One final question on the mood here. We had an interesting question from a Spanish teacher, a language teacher.
Je respire une ambiance morose ici à Bruxelles, où on a l'impression que quelque chose se brise, quelque chose se casse, et qui met en difficulté l'avenir de l'Union européenne.
Okay, so what's the mood here? Is something broken here, or are we going to try to seize on this as a positive thing?
I'm very pragmatic about these things. I said to you that I believe the world is in a constant crisis. And sometimes when things break, they release an energy. And perhaps this is the moment where Europe is deeply challenged. If you put a clause into a treaty to allow a member state leave, then at some stage it's going to be tested. We now have that test. It's a large member state, and yes, it has caused ripples of concern, but it's not with, we have the capacity to respond to this.
How do you see that in the future?
Well, what I would say is that I don't see a negative mood, so I wouldn't subscribe this view. What I see, that I think it's something that is really a characteristic of our time, is uncertainty.
That's our job. That's the challenge for us, not to cause alarm or concern. Listen, respect, and get on with the job.
And get on with the job. Mairead McGuinness, Paulo Rangel, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
That's it for now on People First. Find out more about the activities of the largest political force in Parliament by checking eppgroup.eu. Until next time, thanks for watching.